I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just reaching for the extra candles in the hall closet when I heard my son's voice. Low, sharp, certain. "We'll send her to the nursing home after New Year." That was it. No discussion, no hesitation. As if I wasn't a person, but a problem to be removed once the holidays were done. I stood frozen, one hand still resting on the closet door. My breath caught somewhere in my throat, as if it had nowhere left to go. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just listened as his wife responded, quieter, but not kinder. "Yes, it's time. I can't keep tiptoeing around her moods. She doesn't even do much anymore." They were in the kitchen, one room over. The children were asleep upstairs, and the scent of cinnamon still hung in the air from the cookies I'd baked that afternoon. I remember every detail, because that was the moment something inside me cracked and then rearranged itself. I closed the closet door softly, walked upstairs as if nothing had happened, sat on the edge of the guest bed and looked at my hands. My fingers still smelled like vanilla. My slippers were worn thin at the toes. I was 68 years old and apparently scheduled for disposal. The strange thing is, I wasn't even angry. Not then. I was calm in that way people get when something becomes irreversibly clear. I'd raised that boy, Thomas, fed him, worked 2 jobs to get him through school, sat beside him in emergency rooms, held him through heartbreak, helped him buy this very house 10 years ago. And now he was planning my exile in whispers, after the decorations were taken down, after the lights were boxed away. So I packed, not in a rage, not in tears, quietly, deliberately. My old blue suitcase, the one with the scuffed corners, still stood in the guest closet. I hadn't used it since Derek's funeral. 5 years ago this March, I folded 2 sweaters, 2 pairs of slacks, my winter coat. The cash I'd stashed in an envelope for unexpected things went into the side pocket. I took my medication, my toothbrush, the book I was halfway through. No notes, no dramatic speeches. Just a woman reclaiming her exit. It was almost midnight when I closed the door behind me. Their house, the one I helped them keep during the layoffs, glowed with warm light behind me. I didn't look back. The taxi driver was a young girl, maybe 25. She didn't ask questions, just looked at me once in the mirror and said, "Where to, ma'am?" "I'll tell you on the way," I answered. I needed to think, not just about where to go, but how to begin again. We drove in silence for a while. I watched the town pass by. The library, where I used to take Tom as a boy. The bakery that still made rye bread like no one else. The tiny park with the duck pond. Wilmington hadn't changed much. Maybe I had. I asked her to take me to the Rose Hill Motor Lodge, a quiet place near the outskirts of town. They knew me there. Years ago, Derek and I had stayed there during our kitchen remodel. The woman at the desk, Denise, recognized me, gave me a room key without fuss. "No bags?" she asked. "Just this," I said, lifting my suitcase. "Long stay?" Undecided. That night, I sat on the edge of a too-firm mattress and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't plan. I just breathed. For the first time in years, no one asked me to do anything, be anything, smile politely, say less, give more. I just existed. And that, surprisingly, was enough. The next morning, I walked to a corner cafe and ordered tea. The kind waitress called me "ma'am" and gave me an extra biscuit on the side. I felt almost invisible, but in a peaceful way, like no one expected anything of me for once. It wasn't until the second day that the phone started ringing. First Thomas, then his wife, then again. I let them call, let the voicemail fill up. I wasn't ready to hear excuses or promises. I already knew the truth. I'd overstayed my usefulness in their world, but not in mine. I opened a notebook from the drawer in the motel room and wrote one sentence. I am not furniture to be rearranged when it suits them. That sentence sat there on the page like an anchor. I had no plan, no map, but I had myself. And for now, that was going to be enough. By the third morning, the motel room started to feel less like a hiding place and more like a waiting room between two lives. The bedspread was stiff and floral. The carpet smelled faintly of old coffee, and the window looked out onto the parking lot, where an oil stain marked the same spot every night. Still, there was something oddly grounding about the stillness. No one needed me to get breakfast on the table. No one was sighing because I took too long in the bathroom. No one asked me to keep it down when I put on my old jazz records. I took small steps, got myself a prepaid phone, paid for another week at the Rose Hill, walked to the library and got a fresh card. The woman at the desk didn't recognize me, though I'd spent years there when Tom was little. They'd rearranged the layout, replaced the dusty encyclopedias with rows of glowing computers. But the books still smelled the same. That afternoon, I called Esther. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, not since her sister's funeral, when I'd sent flowers and a card and hadn't made it to the service. She picked up on the second ring. Well, I'll be, she said. Marjorie Lane, alive and calling. Alive and figuring things out, I said. There was a pause, and then her voice softened. You sound tired. I left Tom's house, I said. Another pause. Oh, she said. They finally did it? Almost. I overheard them planning it. I explained briefly, not the whole thing, just enough. Where are you staying? She asked. I told her. She didn't scold me or ask why I didn't come to her. Instead, she said, You're not the first, and you won't be the last. I smiled for the first time all week. Esther offered her guest room. She lived alone since her second husband passed. But I needed my own space. Not another bed under another roof where I'd be someone else's responsibility. I need to stand up on my own, I told her. You always did, she said. After we hung up, I called a man named Chuck, an old friend of Derek's who used to run a few rental units around town. I wasn't sure the number still worked, but he answered. Chuck, it's Marjorie Lane. You wouldn't happen to have a vacancy, would you? He remembered me right away. Said he had a small unit. Nothing fancy but quiet, with heat that worked, and a sturdy lock. It's on Maple and 6th. Ground floor. You interested? When can I see it? That evening, I visited the place. The apartment was small. A one-bedroom with scuffed floors, yellowing blinds, and a fridge that hummed like an old radio. But it had its own front door and a little patch of grass outside the window. It was mine, if I wanted it. First month, security deposit. Chuck said he'd waive the application since he knew me. I signed the papers right there at the chipped Formica table. The next day, I moved in with my blue suitcase and a bag of groceries. Denise from the motel drove me. She said she'd never seen someone check out smiling. I bought a folding table from the thrift store, a second-hand armchair, and a kettle. That night, I drank tea on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the quiet hum of my new space. It was strange being alone. For decades, my days had been shaped by other people's needs, lunches packed, calls made, appointments arranged, favors done. Now, Time unfolded in long, open stretches. I didn't know what to fill it with yet. The first thing I did was go to the bank, not the drive-through. I went inside, waited in line, and sat down across from a young woman named Sophia. She had a polite smile and a soft voice. I told her I wanted to review all standing authorizations on my accounts. She blinked. All of them? Yes, I said. Every transfer, every automatic payment, every shared access. I want everything put back under my name only. Sophia typed. Her fingers hesitated. It says there's a joint authorization here. A Thomas Lane? My son, I said. Please remove him. There was a pause. She nodded. Understood. It took nearly 40 minutes to go through everything. I had no idea how many little threads I'd tied to their lives over the years. Gym memberships, car insurance, school donations. All of it quietly draining from my account every month. I'd also like to transfer a portion of the balance to a new savings account, I said. Just in my name. Sophia smiled, not condescending, but with something like respect. Yes, ma'am. When I walked out of the bank, the sky was low and gray, and the wind had picked up. But I felt lighter, like I'd finally cut the cords that had kept me quietly bleeding. That evening, I walked to a nearby park. I sat on a cold bench and watched children climb the same kind of rusted monkey bars Tom used to fall off when he was 5. I thought of him then, not as the man who whispered in the kitchen, but as the boy with a scabbed chin and wild energy. Where had he gone? It hurt, of course it did, but it hurt less than staying. Back at the apartment, I wrote a list of things I wanted to learn. Nothing grand, just skills I'd always pushed aside. Online banking, making soup from scratch, finding a book club, fixing the hem of my trousers without asking for help. I wasn't building a new life, not exactly. I was remembering the one I'd abandoned, the one I'd quietly handed over in exchange for being useful. Well, no one was using me now, and I had no plans to be available. The silence in the new apartment was different than the silence at Tom's house. There, it had always felt tight, cautious, like a breath held too long. Here, it was open, not warm yet, not exactly comfortable, but honest, a quiet that didn't hide things behind walls. I woke up early, as I always had, 6:15 sharp, even without an alarm. Old habits. For decades, I'd gotten up before everyone else, made coffee, checked backpacks, packed lunches. It took me a moment, lying under my thrifted comforter, to remember that none of that was mine anymore. No one needed me to toast bread or find missing socks. There was still comfort in ritual. I brewed tea, opened the curtains, wiped down the kitchen counter, though it was already clean. I didn't have much furniture yet, just a card table and a folding chair, but the floor was mine. The air was mine. No one would come in and change the channel or sigh if I left dishes in the sink. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache behind my ribs. Not regret, not exactly. Something more like bruising. You can love someone so much for so long that you start to forget how to love yourself. And when they take that love for granted, reduce it to background noise, something they assume will always be there, it leaves a particular kind of emptiness when you finally walk away. I didn't feel brave. People keep using that word, brave, for women like me. But bravery implies some kind of fearlessness. What I felt was fear, certainly, but also weariness. Like I'd simply run out of the ability to pretend I didn't hear what I'd heard in that hallway. I sat down with a pen and a cheap notebook from the corner store. I hadn't kept a journal since I was a teenager, But the words came anyway. I left because I was already gone in their minds. The sentence sat on the page like a splinter. Later that morning, I walked to the hardware store to get some hooks for the kitchen wall. I wanted to hang my 2 good pans. The man behind the counter was older, wore thick glasses, and didn't rush me. He asked if I was new in the neighborhood. I said yes, but didn't explain further. Back outside, the sky looked like aluminum foil, flat and cold. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked 3 extra blocks just to move, to feel my legs. I passed a community center with a paper sign taped to the glass. Free computer classes, seniors welcome. I took a photo of the flyer with my new phone, the first I'd ever owned that didn't come from my son's family plan. My fingers still fumbled with the screen, but I'd learn. That was the point. Back home, I made soup from a can, added herbs, toasted a slice of bread in the oven. I ate at the folding table and read the newspaper cover to cover, including the obituaries. Not because I expected to know anyone, just because it made me feel grounded. I wasn't a ghost. Not yet. The phone rang around 4 p.m. I let it ring the first time, let the voicemail pick it up. When it rang again 10 minutes later, I answered. It was Tom. "Mom," he said, breathless, like he'd been running. "Where are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "I'm safe." "Why didn't you leave a note?" I didn't think I owed one. A long pause. Then, "You scared the kids." "I'm sorry they were frightened," I said, and I meant it. "But that wasn't my doing." Another pause. Then cautiously, "Was it about what you heard?" "Yes." "Mom, I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "You meant it exactly the way it sounded, Thomas." A different silence now. Heavy, loaded. We were talking in frustration," he said. "Things have been tense." I let that hang there. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close. "I'm not calling to fight," he continued. "Just to understand. You've always said this family was your life." "That was my mistake," I replied, "making one thing my whole life." He didn't respond. I told him I'd found a place, that I was all right, that I didn't want him or the kids to worry. But I didn't tell him where I was. I wasn't ready. "I can come get you," he offered. "I don't need to be gotten." Then came the words I'd been waiting for. Not because I wanted them, but because I knew they were coming. "But what are you going to do?" The implication was there. What could I possibly do without them? "I'm going to live, Tom," I said quietly. "That's what I'm going to do." That night, I listened to music on the little portable radio I'd bought at a pawn shop years ago. Slow jazz, soft vocals, nothing fancy. I sat in the armchair and stared at the wall, not out of sadness, but out of amazement. I'd never sat like this before. Still, unneeded, alone, and felt at peace. I wasn't angry at Tom, not anymore. I wasn't even angry at his wife, who had long since stopped seeing me as anything but a tired fixture in her household. What I felt was something quieter, sturdier. The beginning of distance. The healthy kind. The kind that reminds you where your skin ends and someone else's grip begins. I wrote another sentence in my notebook before bed. I don't know what comes next, but I know it won't be a return. The next morning, I put on my wool coat, the gray one with the missing button, and took the bus into town. It was cold, and my knees were already protesting, but I didn't care. I had something to do. I hadn't set foot in the main branch of Broadwell National Bank in nearly 5 years. Last time was with Tom. We were finalizing paperwork for the refinance on their house. He'd done most of the talking. I'd done most of the signing. That's how it usually went. The lobby still smelled like lemon polish and printer toner. A young man at the reception desk smiled too brightly. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts and about power of attorney." His smile faltered for a second. "Of course. I'll get someone from our account services team." I was shown to a glass-walled office where a woman in her 30s introduced herself as Brittany. Her voice had that professional warmth, efficient but rehearsed. After verifying my identity, she pulled up my file. I watched her expression shift as her screen filled with lines of automatic transfers and permissions. "You have quite a few active arrangements," she said gently. "So I've been told," I replied. "I'd like to review every one of them, starting with who has access." She clicked through screens. "It looks like your son, Thomas Lane, has full financial power of attorney. He can access all linked accounts and authorize transactions." "Remove it," I said. She blinked. "You'd like to remove his access, all of it, today?" There was a pause, then a slow, careful nod. "Yes, ma'am. I can print the revocation form. You'll need to sign it in front of a notary. We have one on site." "Good." While she printed papers, I stared at the transaction history on her screen. I recognized the names: insurance companies, tuition payments, auto loans, even a recurring monthly charge to a luxury fitness club that I knew wasn't for me. "Can you also cancel every automatic payment that isn't related to my own bills?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's quite a list." "I've got time." We went line by line: Tom's mortgage top-ups, Karen's car payment, an annual summer camp fee for the kids. I'd been paying for them so long I'd stopped noticing. "You've been very generous," Brittany said, trying to make it a compliment. "No," I corrected. "I've been very invisible." She looked at me then, properly. Not as a sweet old woman with a handbag full of tissues, but as someone making a decision. It took nearly an hour. At the end of it, I signed the final forms and slid the pen across the table. "I'd also like to open a new account," I added, "a separate savings one, only in my name." "Any beneficiaries?" "Not yet," I said. "I'm still thinking about that." When I walked out of the bank, the cold wind didn't bite as much. I felt steadier, like I'd just closed a door that had been swinging open too long. Back home, I made tea and sat at my little table, the one I'd picked up at the thrift shop for $10. I laid out every receipt I'd kept in a shoebox labeled family. There were school fees, grocery reimbursements, dental bills, even that $5,000 transfer from 3 years ago when Karen's mother had emergency surgery. I'd never asked questions. It was all so familiar, being the one who could help out, who could just cover this until next month. For years, I told myself I was being kind, that this was what mothers did. But what had I taught them in the process? That love meant money, that presence meant provision, that my worth was measured in checks cleared and debts forgiven. Well, no more. That evening, I got a call from Karen. I recognized the number, but didn't answer. A minute later, a text came through. "The insurance didn't go through today. Did something happen with the account?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Yes, I've made some changes. Please handle all future expenses independently." A few seconds passed. Then, "Is this a joke?" I didn't answer. The next call came from Tom. I let it ring. Then another. I turned the phone off. That night, I sat by the window, blanket over my legs, and stared at the streetlight across the road. A quiet thought flickered in the back of my mind. Small, sharp, undeniable. They never thought I'd leave. Never imagined I'd stop paying, stop helping, stop being available. That was their mistake. They had treated my presence as permanent, my support as endless. But even roots snap when the soil turns cold enough. And I was done waiting for spring in a garden where I was no longer welcome. It was 2 days after I'd shut down the accounts when I heard the knock on my door. Not the casual kind. Not the neighbor with sugar knock. No, this one was tense, rhythmic. The kind of knock that comes with an agenda. I didn't have a doorbell yet, so the sound echoed through the apartment, flat against the bare walls. I knew before I opened it. Tom stood there, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, like he'd rehearsed every word on the drive over. He was still in his office coat, the one with the expensive stitching and not a wrinkle out of place. His eyes went straight past me, scanning the room behind my shoulder, like he needed confirmation that this was where I'd really gone. "Hi, Mom." I opened the door wider but didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let him in. He walked in like a stranger, like a man walking through someone else's home, which I suppose he was. The space was small, quiet, lived in. My tea mug still sat on the table next to a half-finished crossword and a pair of reading glasses. I'd just started a pot of soup. The smell filled the room with something real. Not candle sweet, not decorative. Nourishment. Tom hovered near the folding chair like he wasn't sure whether to sit. I gestured. "If you're here, sit." He did. Slowly, as if the chair might snap beneath the weight of whatever he'd brought with him. "Karen's worried," he began. "The kids, too. You just disappeared. I told you I was safe. But no address? No call? You think that's okay?" I sat across from him. "Let's not pretend concern was the primary emotion in your house. That's not fair." I looked at him. "No. What's not fair is planning to send someone away and assuming she'll be too old or too weak to notice." He winced, just slightly, enough to tell me that at least the words had landed. "I didn't mean it like that," he said. Karen was upset. We were both tired. You said it clearly. We were venting. You were making decisions." He rubbed his temple. "Look, Mom, I'm not here to argue. I'm here because this whole situation is spinning out." I waited. "The bank," he said finally. "Everything's frozen. The insurance, the tuition payments, the auto transfers. I know. You canceled them. I did. You revoked access. I did." His voice rose slightly. "You didn't even tell me. I didn't think I owed you a warning, Thomas. You didn't give me one." That landed harder. He sat back, stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he'd never seen me fully before. Maybe I'd made that too easy. "We depended on that support," he said, quieter now. "We made commitments based on it." "And I depended on being treated like family," I replied. "I made commitments based on that, too." He ran a hand over his face. "It wasn't like that, Mom. You're twisting it." I let the silence answer. Eventually, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice softening. "We're under a lot of pressure. You know that. The kids, Karen's job, the house. It's been a lot. Sometimes we say things we don't mean. You know that. You've said things too." "I have," I admitted. "But I never said you were better off without me." He looked up then, directly, And in his eyes, for the first time, I saw something that looked like regret, but I didn't trust it yet. "You're my mother," he said, like it was proof of something. "We can't keep going like this." I folded my hands. "I agree. I want to fix this." "Do you?" "Yes." I looked around the room. "Then start by understanding this. I am not coming back." He blinked. "What?" "I'm not moving back into your house. I'm not resuming the payments. I'm not pretending I didn't hear what I heard." "But what are we supposed to do?" "You're an adult, Tom, with a job, with a wife, with responsibilities. You'll figure it out." The silence stretched. He looked around again, taking in the chipped baseboards, the secondhand bookshelf, the folded laundry in the corner. Maybe he thought it was beneath me. Maybe he thought it would shame me. But I felt nothing but calm. Finally, he stood. "You're really doing this?" "I already did." He lingered at the door. I stood too, walked him out. Just before he stepped into the hallway, he paused. "You're not even mad, are you?" "I was," I said. "But now I'm just done." He didn't reply. I closed the door. It was quiet after he left. The soup had gone cold on the stove, but I didn't mind. I reheated it and ate standing up, staring out the window. The wind had picked up. Leaves scattered down the sidewalk, brittle and unapologetic. That night, I wrote just 2 words in my notebook. Never again. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not out of vanity, those years were long behind me, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see myself the way someone else might. My hair was mostly silver now, pulled back with a simple barrette. My skin had softened around the edges. Yes, but my eyes hadn't changed. Still sharp. Still watching. I put on my cleanest blouse, the navy one with the buttons that didn't gap at the chest, and a pair of slacks that fit well enough. I added my winter coat and slipped my notebook into my bag. I wasn't just going out for groceries or a walk. I was going to ask for something. The idea had started like a flicker 2 nights ago, when I passed the library and saw a sign in the window. Volunteers needed, no experience necessary. I'd stood there in the cold, reading it twice. It didn't say young people only. It didn't say computer experts. Just needed. The same building had once been my weekly sanctuary. Tom was 5 when I first brought him. Tiny hands wrapped around a picture book, voice echoing too loud in the reading room. I remembered sitting in that same space, watching him explore the stacks while I read cookbooks or mystery novels, feeling useful and invisible all at once. Now I was walking in alone, no child at my side, no role to play. Inside, it still smelled of dust and laminated pages. They'd remodeled, yes, new shelves, brighter lights. But the hush remained, a kind of reverence I'd always loved. At the front desk sat a young woman with cropped hair and a wool sweater layered over a plaid shirt. She looked up as I approached. "Hi there, can I help you?" I cleared my throat. I saw the sign in the window, about volunteers. Her face lit up. "Yes, we're always looking. Do you have a preference? Sorting, shelving, story time?" I blinked. "You let volunteers read?" "Of course, especially during school breaks. Kids love new voices." Something in my chest fluttered, not nerves exactly, more like something long dormant waking up. "I used to read to my grandson," I said. "He loved the wind in the willows." The woman smiled wider. "Then you'd be perfect." She introduced herself as Jenna, the volunteer coordinator. She handed me a form, just 1 page. No invasive questions, no references required. Just my name, phone number, and what I'd feel comfortable doing. I wrote carefully. Under skills, I wrote, patient, clear reader, good memory for where things go. Jenna glanced at it when I handed it back. Would you like to start next week? Why not today? I asked. And just like that, I was shown around. The tasks were simple. Put books back in order, straighten the tables, return misfiled items to their proper shelves. My knees ached, and I moved slower than the younger volunteers. But no one rushed me. No one sighed or corrected. When I asked where the large print biographies were, Jenna walked me there without condescension. You're a natural, she said. I smiled, but didn't reply. The truth was, I hadn't felt like a natural at anything in years. At noon, they offered me tea in the staff lounge, just a folding table and some mismatched mugs, but the kindness was real. I sipped slowly, listening to two high schoolers argue about the best movie adaptation of a classic novel. When I left 3 hours later, I felt taller. Not younger. That wasn't the goal. Just steadier. I didn't tell anyone about the library. Not Esther, not even Reed, who'd texted me that morning just to say hi. It wasn't a secret. It was just mine. That night, I took a hot bath, dried my hair properly, and sat down with an actual book. Not a screen. The apartment was still quiet, still spare, but it no longer echoed. It felt inhabited. I didn't need the library to pay me. I didn't need it to prove anything. I just needed to feel like I belonged somewhere again. And for the first time in years, I did. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, I don't want to be useful. I want to be valued. It was a gray afternoon when the phone rang. Not the new one I used for practical things, but the landline I'd had installed in the apartment, mostly out of habit. I kept the number unlisted. Only 2 people had it, the library and Esther. I picked up on the second ring. Marjorie Lane, I said, the way I always had. A short pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. Well, if that isn't the sound of a woman who still knows how to answer a phone properly. I laughed, a short, stunned burst that came from somewhere real. Sheila Carmichael, as I live and breathe. I heard a little whisper about you, she said, from someone at the bank, of all places. Said you walked in there like you owned the place and walked out like you'd set it on fire. I smiled. That's not entirely inaccurate. Well, it was enough to make me dial. Are you still in Wilmington? I am. Then let's do this right. Tomorrow. Lunch. My treat. I hesitated. Not out of reluctance, but unfamiliarity. I hadn't been invited anywhere in months that wasn't a birthday party for one of the kids or a last-minute call to help with a casserole. She sensed it. Come on, Marge. 2 old broads catching up. You don't even have to put on mascara. I said yes. The next day, I pulled on a soft sweater and one of the good scarves I'd kept in a box labeled Nice Things. The cafe Sheila picked was one of those places with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu, halfway between trendy and honest. She was already there when I arrived. Red lipstick, a silk blouse with too many buttons, and the same pointed look in her eyes I remembered from our church committee days. She stood to hug me. You look good, she said. Like someone who finally set something down after carrying it too long. We ordered soup and bread, and the minute the server walked away, she leaned in, voice low. So tell me the truth. You left? I did. And? It's quieter, but it's real. She nodded slowly. I've thought about it, you know. Every time my daughter rolls her eyes because I don't know what an HDMI cable is. Every time I'm told I worry too much when I ask about the bills I pay, every time I get called cute for having an opinion. I reached for my tea. You ever say something? Once, Christmas 2 years ago. I asked if they needed me to bring anything. My son-in-law said, "Just your checkbook." I flinched. "You're kidding." "I wish." I laughed it off, pretended I didn't hear it, but I heard it. We ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then she said, "They treat us like the help, Marge, but polite help. Help with boundaries. Help who says thank you when they're included. We disappear in our own families, inch by inch." I nodded. I disappeared the minute I stopped being convenient. "But you didn't stay gone," she said. "That's the difference." She asked about the apartment, the library, my days. I told her everything, and she listened like it mattered, not with pity, but with a kind of admiration. "You know," she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "we should do this again. Make it a thing. Regular. I'd like that." And I meant it. Before we left, she reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm proud of you. You didn't go out with a bang. You walked out with your spine straight. That takes more than anger. That takes knowing who you are." I swallowed hard. Later, back at home, I sat in my armchair and stared at the window. The street outside was quiet. An older man walked a dog in a little coat. A teenager rode past on a rusted bike. The world hadn't changed, but I had. I added a new page to my notebook. We don't vanish when they stop seeing us. We vanish when we stop seeing ourselves. I'm not vanishing. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a gas bill and a grocery store flyer. The envelope was pale pink, addressed in handwriting that immediately tightened something in my chest. Ella, Tom's daughter, my granddaughter. 17 and still writing letters in ink, even in a house full of screens. The return address was theirs, not hers. I turned the envelope over twice before opening it, heart thudding like I was about to be told something I already knew but hadn't wanted to see written down. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. "Dear Grandma, Dad says you left suddenly. No one tells me anything, so I asked. A lot. He just said you needed space. But I don't believe that. You don't just leave unless someone makes you feel like you're not wanted. I hope I'm wrong. I miss you. I miss your tea, and how you never rush me when I talk. I miss your stories, the ones about Grandpa and how he once chased a dog out of the church. I miss how you always remembered my piano recitals even when my own parents forgot. If I did something wrong, I'm sorry. But I don't think I did. I think maybe other people did, and you just finally got tired of it. Can I come see you? Even just for a little while? Love, Ella." I held the letter in both hands for a long time. My mouth had gone dry, and there was a deep, quiet ache under my ribs. The kind that doesn't demand attention, just stays there like a soft weight. She hadn't known. Of course she hadn't. I could have written back. Could have sent her my number, told her how to find me. But I didn't want to wait. I called the library and let them know I wouldn't be in that afternoon. Then I took the bus across town, got off 3 stops early, and walked the last few blocks to the high school. The front office was suspicious, as they should be, until I handed them my ID and explained I wasn't there to take Ella anywhere. I just wanted to leave something. They agreed to call her to the front. She appeared 10 minutes later, hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, the same navy coat I'd bought her last Christmas, slipping off one shoulder. She froze when she saw me. Then she ran. She didn't walk, didn't hesitate. Just ran, full speed, like a child again. right into my arms. She didn't cry, but I felt the way she held on, arms tight, face buried into my coat. "I thought you were gone for good," she whispered. "Not gone, sweetheart. Just somewhere new." We sat outside on a bench near the front lawn, her hand never leaving mine. "They wouldn't tell me anything," she said. "They acted like you were on some kind of vacation, but I knew it wasn't that. It felt wrong." "I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear," I said. "Something that made it clear I needed to make a change." She looked down. "It was Dad, wasn't it?" I didn't answer, but she already knew. "You don't have to tell me," she said quietly. "I see how they treat you. I've always seen it." I brushed her hair back gently. "You're not part of that, Ella. Don't think for a moment that you are." She nodded. I wish I'd done something. I should have stood up for you more." "You did more than enough," I said. "You loved me. You noticed me. That's more than some adults manage." She pulled something from her backpack, a crumpled envelope with 2 movie tickets inside. "I was going to ask you to come with me. It's a little film thing at the old theater. Thought maybe it'd make you laugh." I looked at the tickets. "It still could." Her face lit up. "You'd come?" "I'm free Thursday night." We talked until the bell rang. When she stood to go, she hugged me again, longer this time. "Text me later," she said, "or call, or write another letter. Just don't disappear again, okay?" "I won't." That evening, I sat at my little table with the envelope propped up in front of me like a photo. I made tea and let it steep too long. I didn't care. There are moments in life that come quiet. No music, no spotlight. And yet they shift the axis of your heart. This was one. That night, I wrote in my notebook. They lost their mother, but she didn't lose her granddaughter. And that makes all the difference. She showed up without warning. No call, no message, no apology. Just knocked on my door like nothing had happened. I almost didn't open it. But I'm not afraid of Karen. Not anymore. I swung the door open and met her eyes. The same sharp gaze she used to give the kids when they tracked mud into the kitchen. Only now it was aimed at me. She didn't say hello. "Can I come in?" she asked, tight-lipped. I stepped aside wordlessly. She walked in like she still owned the air around me, her heels clicking on the worn laminate. She looked around once. The folding table, the stack of books on the radiator, the curtain rods I still hadn't gotten around to fixing. "So this is where you've been?" I didn't answer. I let her keep going. "You could have told us. You didn't have to make it a whole performance." "A performance?" She turned. "The bank, the accounts, the texts you ignored. You ghosted your own family, Marjorie." "I left," I said calmly. "There's a difference. You disappeared. I was dismissed. I simply responded." She crossed her arms. "Do you have any idea what this has done to the kids? To Tom? I imagine it's made things inconvenient." She flinched at that. "Good." He's been under so much pressure, and now, on top of that, everything's falling apart. The insurance, the mortgage, and Ella. She's been moody and secretive lately. I know you've been talking to her." "I have. She wrote me," I responded. Karen's voice sharpened. "You're undermining her father." I raised an eyebrow. "By answering a letter?" "She's still a child. She doesn't understand the whole picture." "No," I said, "but she sees it, and that's enough." Karen looked like she was gearing up for a full monologue, the kind where she walks in circles and uses phrases like, "at the end of the day," and "what's best for the family." I'd heard them all before. This time, I didn't offer her the floor. "You came here to blame me," I said, "and I'll make this simple for you. I'm not accepting it. I'm not blaming you." "Yes, you are. You came here expecting me to feel guilty, to feel ashamed. But I don't." She stared at me. For once, she had nothing ready. I kept going. "For years, I helped raise your children, ran your errands, paid for your car, your vacations, your furniture. And not once did I hear a sincere thank you. Only suggestions about how I could be less in the way." I adapted. I stayed quiet. And then you and my son discussed sending me off like a broken appliance, thinking I wouldn't hear it. That's not. But I did hear it. And I left. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call the neighbors. I just packed and walked out. So don't stand here and lecture me about family. Karen's face flushed. For a second, I saw something human in it. Not softness exactly, but something close to discomfort. Recognition, maybe. "I never wanted things to get ugly," she said. "They didn't. Not on my end." We stood in silence for a while. The wind brushed the window pane like it was trying to remind us how thin the walls were. Finally, she said, "What are you going to do now?" "Live," I answered, "and do it on my own terms." She blinked. "That's it?" "That's enough." Karen turned toward the door, then paused. "Tom thinks you're never coming back." I met her eyes. "He's right." She didn't argue, just left. I watched her go, down the steps, across the cracked sidewalk, into her car. She didn't look back. Neither did I. Later that evening, I took out my notebook and wrote one sentence. "There is no power in being tolerated, only in being free." It took time for the quiet to stop feeling like a punishment. In the beginning, it was too much. The silence after dinner, the stillness of the mornings, the echo of footsteps in a hallway that held only me. I'd spent so many years inside a house full of other people's noise, other people's needs. When it all fell away, it felt like I'd fallen too. But slowly, the quiet became something else. Space, not absence, but room. Now I woke up when I wanted to, not to the crash of cereal bowls or the thud of kids racing downstairs. I had a clock on the nightstand, but I didn't set it. My body knew when it was time to rise. Sometimes earlier, sometimes not. No one noticed but me. I started each morning the same way. Tea, the local paper, a short walk down Maple Street, and back again. The cold didn't bother me. I liked the way it bit at my cheeks, reminded me I still had a face of my own. On Wednesdays, I joined a senior yoga class at the community center. I was the youngest in the room, oddly enough. Most were in their 70s or 80s, but no one minded. The instructor, a kind woman named Delia, with more patience than most saints, never asked why I was there. She just smiled when I arrived and handed me a mat. The first few classes I could barely reach my knees. My back popped like bubble wrap. But I kept going. Week after week, I began to stretch a little further, breathe a little deeper. There was no music, just the sound of breath and the occasional chuckle when someone tipped too far. After class, we'd sit in a circle with paper cups of tea. The women talked about arthritis, grandchildren, news headlines. I listened. Sometimes I added a sentence or two. No one interrupted. No one told me to wrap it up or not now. That was new. I also signed up for a digital literacy course, Thursday evenings in a fluorescent-lit room behind the public library. 10 of us sat at desktop computers, learning how to open documents, send emails, use a spreadsheet. It was humbling at first. I'd spent years pretending I wasn't good with technology, letting Tom or Karen handle everything. Now I was the one clicking and typing, sometimes slowly, sometimes wrong, but I was doing it. At the end of our second week, the instructor asked us to send an email to someone we admired. I sent mine to Ella. The subject line was simple: "Thank you for seeing me." She replied within an hour, "Always, and I love you." Those small things, yoga, emails, the daily newspaper, began to form a shape, a rhythm, a new kind of life. Was it lonely? Yes. Sometimes the silence still pressed too hard. The walls felt too still. There were nights I wanted someone to call just to ask what I was watching on television. No big questions, just proof that I hadn't disappeared. But the difference now was this: I didn't mistake being alone for being abandoned. I had chosen this space, chosen myself. And I was filling the silence with things I wanted, not things I had to carry. I even started a small project, a recipe notebook. Not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote down old favorites, things Derek used to love, meals Ella had enjoyed as a child. I added notes in the margins: too much salt last time, try lemon instead of vinegar. The notebook filled slowly, one page at a time. But it felt good to leave something behind that wasn't just a bank statement or a grocery list. Something that said, I was here, I remembered, I cared. One evening after yoga, Delia walked beside me to the bus stop. "You seem lighter these days," she said. "I am," I told her. "But not because life got easier." "Then why?" "Because I stopped pretending I wasn't sinking." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe we all do, eventually. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of being seen. Now I see myself." My 69th birthday arrived without fanfare. No cake, no candles, no early morning shouts from upstairs. Just me, a soft snowfall outside, and the quiet hum of the radiator trying its best. I woke slowly, without alarms, and sat in bed for a while, letting the room brighten around me. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I might, not out of sadness, but out of habit. But instead, I felt steady. A little hollow, maybe, but not broken. The first thing I did was make myself a proper breakfast. Not toast, not leftover soup. I made eggs, the good kind, soft in the middle, and cut up an orange I'd been saving. I even used the ceramic plate I usually reserved for guests I never had. I sat at the table, alone, and ate like I was worth something. Because I was. Around 10, I wrapped a small box in brown paper. Inside was a new fountain pen. I'd bought it last week at a stationery store downtown, after passing it for months. The girl behind the counter had offered to gift wrap it, and I said yes, then brought it home and waited. I wrote a card to myself, simple and short. To Marjorie. "You are not late. You are right on time." Then I opened the package and held the pen like something sacred. At noon, I walked to the park, yes, in the cold, and sat on the same bench where I'd once taken Tom to feed ducks. The pond was frozen now, the ducks long gone, but the bench remained. Some things do. I watched a mother pull her toddler along on a plastic sled, both of them laughing. I didn't envy her youth. I didn't ache for the years behind me. I simply observed and felt something close to peace. When I got home, there was a card in the mailbox, handwritten, no return address. I opened it on the steps before I even took off my gloves. "Happy birthday, Grandma. I didn't want to send this to Dad's house. I figured you wouldn't want that. But I hope this finds you. I'm thinking of you today. I wore the scarf you gave me, the green one. It still smells like you. Love, Ella. I closed my eyes for a moment and let that sentence sit. It still smells like you. I stepped inside and brewed tea. Earl Grey. Then I pulled out the book I'd been saving. A thick novel with slow language and characters that unfolded like old sweaters. I read for hours, pausing only to stretch and reheat the tea. No one called. I didn't check for messages. I didn't need the world today. But around 4, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was Esther. She held a grocery bag and smiled like she hadn't decided whether this was brave or ridiculous. I brought cake, she said, and soup. I didn't know which mood you were in. I laughed. Not a big laugh, but real. I stepped aside. We sat at my tiny table, both of us too tall for the folding chairs, eating carrot cake off mismatched plates. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't offer advice. She just sat there and told me about her neighbor who accidentally locked herself in the garden shed for 2 hours and the dog that wouldn't stop barking through it all. It felt normal, not like celebration, not like pity, just a kind of presence, the best kind. Later, we washed the dishes together in silence. I dried. She stacked. Then she turned to me and said, I know it's not the life you expected. No, I said, but it's mine now. She nodded. And you're good at it. After she left, I lit the one candle I had, not for a wish, not for tradition, but just to mark the moment. A quiet kind of ceremony. I sat beside it and wrote a line in my notebook with the new pen. I gave myself a birthday. That's more than I used to expect from anyone. And then I added, maybe next year I'll have a full table. Or maybe not. But I'll still be here. The phone rang at 3:17 in the afternoon. I almost didn't pick up. I was halfway through stitching a hem on the one skirt I still bothered to wear in public. The blue one with the neat pleats and a small stain near the bottom that no one but me could see. But something about the ring, not urgent, not casual, made me set the needle down. It was Tom. Hi, Mom. His voice was lighter than it had been the last time, carefully neutral. The way someone speaks when they're trying to pretend the ground beneath them hasn't shifted. Hello, Tom. I thought I'd check in. A pause. How are things? They're fine, I said, and meant it. Another pause. Then a little laugh. Too controlled to be genuine. Well, we're still finding our rhythm without you. Karen's been trying to cook more, not with great results. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in stories dressed up as bridges. I found your old recipe box, he continued. The one with the faded index cards. You used to keep it in the second drawer by the stove. I remember. Ella tried your pot roast recipe. She said it didn't taste like yours, but she tried. That's nice, I said. And it was. But he wasn't calling about pot roast. He cleared his throat. She misses you. I know. She sees you. She writes. Sometimes we talk. I heard it then, the faintest twitch in his voice. Something between surprise and discomfort. She's always been close to you, he said. She listens. Not everyone does. He sighed. Is this how it's going to be now? What do you mean? You, out there, alone, holidays by yourself, not coming to birthdays, us being strangers? I looked out the window. A bus passed, slowing at the corner. I'm not alone, I said. And I'm not a stranger. I'm just not standing in the same place you left me. He didn't speak for a long time. I let the silence stretch. Finally, he said, it just feels extreme. Does it? You didn't have to cut everything off. I didn't cut everything off, Tom. I cut off access, not love. He exhaled sharply. That sounds like the same thing to me. That's because you were used to having both without question. Another pause. Karen's been saying we should try to rebuild things. You and me. The kids, too. Try to get back to something. Something like before? Yes. I closed my eyes for a moment. Tom, what you're asking is for me to forget what happened. No, he said quickly. I'm asking for you to move forward. That's not the same. He didn't argue. I kept my voice calm even. I wasn't angry. I wasn't wounded. I just knew where I stood now, and I liked the ground beneath me. Tom, I said, for most of my life, I gave everything I had to make things easier for everyone else. You, Karen, the kids. I never asked for applause. But when it came time to ask whether I still belonged, even just as a human being, you both had your answer ready. You said it out loud. I told you it wasn't meant that way. I know what I heard, and I believe you meant it exactly as it was said. Maybe not with cruelty, but with certainty. He didn't deny it this time. I don't hate you, I said. I haven't erased you, but I've reclaimed myself, and that doesn't leave room for pretending. He was quiet again. The only sound was a soft thud in the background. Maybe a chair. Maybe one of the kids. I didn't call to fight, he said at last. I know. I guess I hoped you'd be ready to come back. I'm already back, I said. Back to myself. The words hung there, not as a barb, not as a defense, just as a truth. Okay, he said softly. Tell the kids I said hello. I will. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up, gently. I looked around the room, my armchair, my bookshelf, the scarf Ella had forgotten on her last visit. Everything quiet. Everything mine. I picked up the needle and thread and went back to my hem. Then I opened my notebook and wrote. He called like I was still waiting. I wasn't. But I'm still here. That's more than enough. The morning started like any other. Tea, 2 slices of toast with marmalade, and the quiet stretch of sunlight creeping across the linoleum. Outside, the frost hadn't yet melted, and the windows wore their delicate lace of condensation. It was a Tuesday, my library day. I pulled on my coat, tied my scarf neatly, and walked the 4 blocks to the building that had become my second living room. The old oak doors creaked just enough to make me feel known each time I passed through. Jenna greeted me with a wave from the desk, already half buried in returns and overdue notices. We've got a school group coming in today, she said. 4th grade, it'll be chaos. I smiled. Then let's get the carts ready. There was comfort in the rhythm. Reshelving paperbacks, restacking magazines, checking the corners of shelves for abandoned picture books. I liked the quietness of the task, the physicality of order. It didn't ask for more than I could give, but it gave me more than I'd expected. Around 11, the school group arrived. 20 or so children with chapped cheeks and trailing scarves, herded in by 2 exhausted teachers and 1 anxious mother. The noise swallowed the lobby in seconds. I stayed at the far end, near the biography shelves, and watched them dissolve into corners like bees in a field. I didn't mind the noise. It was different from the noise of a house. This wasn't needful or demanding. Just energy, moving through space. While reshelving a row of cookbooks, I heard a small commotion near the reading area. A boy, 8 or 9, was whining at his mother. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Just pick one, she said. We don't have all day. I don't like any of these, the boy muttered. I watched from a few feet away, not intruding, just listening. "Why do we even have to come here?" he added. "It's boring." The mother sighed. "Because it's good for you. And we're not leaving until you check something out." I stepped a little closer, gently, with no grand intention. "Hi there," I said. "Do you like stories with animals?" The boy looked up, half suspicious. "Sometimes." "There's one over here about a bear who starts a bakery," I said. "It's got chocolate cake and explosions. Want to see?" He blinked. "Explosions? Just flour, but it makes a mess. It's funny." He followed me, hesitant but curious. I handed him the book. Thick pages, bright drawings, just silly enough. He opened to the first page and grinned. "This one's better," he admitted, without looking up. The mother mouthed "thank you" behind him. Her eyes looked tired in that familiar way, the kind I used to see in my own reflection. Later, when the group had gathered to leave, I passed by the mother near the doors. She touched my arm lightly. "You're good at this," she said, "with kids." "I had practice," I replied. She studied me for a second, not with pity, not with condescension, just quietly. "You should have been a teacher," she said. "No," I said. "I was a mother." She nodded. "Same thing, really." It caught me off guard. Not what she said, but how she said it. With sincerity. With respect. She didn't know my story. Didn't know what I'd left or lost. But in that moment, I wasn't someone to be pitied. I was someone who still had something to give. That evening, after dinner, I sat by the window with my notebook open and my new pen in hand. I didn't rush. I let the words come on their own. The world still sees me. Not everywhere. Not always. But sometimes, in quiet corners, I'm seen. And not as an old woman. Not as a burden. Just as someone who's still here. I folded the page carefully and tucked it in the back. Not to hide it. Just to keep it safe. The envelope arrived on a Friday. Thick, cream-colored, with her name printed in formal type. No handwriting, no stamp. Hand-delivered, most likely. The kind of envelope that used to terrify her. The kind that usually carried trouble, bills, or obligations. But this time, it wasn't dread she felt. Just a calm, measured curiosity. She made tea first. Sat at the table. Waited until the water stopped steaming before she opened it. Inside, a letterhead she recognized. Sutton and White. The same firm that had handled Derek's will after his death all those years ago. Below that, a brief note in precise legal language. "Dear Mrs. Marjorie Lane, this letter is to inform you that, per the voluntary recommendation of Mr. Thomas Lane, we have initiated proceedings to formally transfer full control of the trust account ending in 1448 into your sole name, without restrictions or co-signatory requirements. All associated responsibilities and rights will be yours exclusively, effective immediately. Please find enclosed the necessary forms for final authorization should you wish to proceed. There is no action required if you do not wish to accept these changes. Warm regards, Elaine Sutton, Esquire." Marjorie stared at the page, her eyes scanning the words again and again, but they didn't shift or soften. They stayed quiet, professional, intentional. She knew what it meant. The account in question, the one Derek had set up just in case, had been slowly drained over the years. A buffer that had paid for grandkids' braces, family vacations, the occasional roof repair. Tom had managed it ever since Derek passed. And Marjorie had never questioned it, not once. It had been for the family. Now suddenly it was being handed back. No apology, no grand explanation, just a shift. It didn't undo anything, didn't return the years, but it said something. It said, "I know you see me now." She signed the forms that evening, not out of need, but out of clarity. She walked them to the post office the next morning herself, stood in line, handed the envelope to the clerk, and watched it disappear into the system like any other letter. There was power in that, too. When she came back home, the phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "I thought it was the right thing. That's all. Hope you're well." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later that week, the bank called to confirm the transfer. A quiet woman with a warm voice walked her through the final steps. No surprises, no pushback. At the end of the call, the woman said gently, "You're fully in control now, Mrs. Lane. Just let us know if you ever need anything else." Marjorie smiled. "I'll let you know if I do." She hung up and sat still for a long time, her tea untouched, cooling beside her. She thought about what that control used to mean, about how often it was offered in words but withheld in practice. How often women her age were trusted with casseroles and babysitting, but not money, not decisions, not space. Now, for the first time in a long time, there were no strings, no caveats, just an account with her name and no one else's. She took out her notebook. Not the usual one, a different one. The old black ledger Derek had once used for household budgeting. She'd kept it all these years, tucked in a drawer. She opened it, ran her fingers over his handwriting. Neat, conservative, always in blue ink. Then she flipped to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, "October budget for one." Below that, in small, steady script, she added, "Groceries, bus fare, books. Yoga class. Ella's birthday, something good. Rain boots, finally." She didn't cry. She didn't even feel sentimental. What she felt was rooted, present, not rescued, restored. That evening, she visited the library like always. A mother and her daughter were returning books at the desk, the little girl clinging to a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. The mother looked over and smiled at Marjorie. "My daughter says you helped her find her new favorite book last week." Marjorie smiled back. "Happy to hear it." The girl peeked from behind her mother's coat. "You know a lot about books." "I've had time to read." The girl nodded solemnly. "I hope I get old and smart like you." Marjorie laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "Well," she said, "it's not as hard as people think. You just have to stay awake." That night before bed, she sat down and wrote in her regular notebook. He didn't say sorry, but he handed back the keys. Sometimes dignity is louder than forgiveness. It had been almost a year since she left. The season had come full circle. Frost returned to the windows, the early dark settled in before supper, and people began bundling themselves in scarves that had sat forgotten in closets since March. Marjorie sat on the bench outside the library, wrapped in her heavy coat, watching the town move at its quiet pace. She didn't need to be anywhere. Her shift at the front desk had ended, and her bag held a novel she'd been saving. But she wasn't in a rush. Not anymore. She thought of all the times she'd sat like this before. On porches, on folding chairs at school plays, in cars while waiting for someone else's errand to end. How many years she'd spent being present without being noticed. Now she noticed herself. There were things she still missed. Voices, moments, pieces of family life that had once been so tangled in her that their absence felt like amputation. But even that ache had changed shape. It was no longer raw, just a fact. A weathered photograph at the edge of memory. She thought about the letter from Tom. A second one had come last week. Not about money. Just a note. A page. He'd written about work, about the kids, about nothing in particular. He hadn't asked for her return, hadn't apologized, she hadn't replied, but she hadn't thrown it away. Ella had visited again the weekend before, brought her a scarf she'd knit in her after-school club. The green was too bright for Marjorie's usual taste, but she wore it anyway. The girl had come on her own. No rides arranged, no secretive whispers. Just a girl who still saw her grandmother as someone worth the trip. They'd sat together in the small apartment, drinking cocoa, watching a film they'd both seen before. No big conversations, just ease. And when Ella left, she'd hugged her tight and said, "You're doing it. You're really doing it." Marjorie hadn't asked what she meant. She knew. Now, sitting on the bench, she saw the sun begin to fall behind the trees. She pulled the scarf tighter, the one Ella had given her, and looked around. There was a woman walking a dog across the street. Older, maybe in her 70s, with a cane in one hand and a leash in the other. She moved slowly, but upright. The dog trotted without tugging. A couple of boys passed on bikes, jackets flapping, voices too loud and full of joy. They didn't look at her, but she didn't mind. She wasn't invisible. She was simply part of the scene. And that was enough. She stood, brushed off the bench, and walked home through the cold. Her key turned easily in the lock. Inside, the room was warm. The radio played soft classical music, something she'd never listened to before the move. She let it play. At the table, she took out her notebook. The same one she'd filled for months now, with sentences that weren't for anyone else. Just her. She opened to a fresh page and wrote slowly, with care. They didn't change. I did. That was the whole point. Not so I could go back, but so I could stay gone without shame. Then she set down the pen. The kettle whistled gently. She rose to pour the water, her movements easy, her back no longer aching the way it once did. She didn't need anything grand to mark the day. No final gesture, no last word. She was already living the proof. She sat down, pulled the blanket over her knees, and began to read. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. If it touched something in you, share it. Comment. Tag someone who needs to hear it. Because some women don't leave. Not because they can't, but because no one ever told them they could.